Hello and welcome back to the Comic Literate Podcast, the podcast that does deep dives into the best of comic books, graphic novels, mangas, and nothing else. I'm your host, soon to be known as Comic Stan. With me, as always, is my harrowing co-host, it's Jamie.
I don't want to be harrowing, but it is spooky season. Spooky season episode 3. We've managed to get 2/3 of the way through and we're still on theme. I'm really proud of us. We're doing it.
And today's theme for anyone who hasn't read the title is the scariest theme of all, in my opinion, which is search engine optimization. Boo!
Yeah, I don't want to do it. You're going to have to deal with the fact that I don't want to do it, so I'm going to derail this situation as much as is possible.
But then we're doing a good thing after that as well. So it's kind of a 2-in-1 episode, which is a first. Good? I mean, I think we can make it good because we're such talented podcasters.
I don't know if talented is the right word there.
We are somewhat experienced podcasters.
I mean, we are. We're what? This is like... Is this episode 40?
You would think I would have the information to hand already, but I don't for some reason. So let me see. And that's wrong. That's the wrong disc. Here we go. Almost there.
Because we didn't start releasing until January, did we? But we've been making these since last autumn.
Yeah, this is episode 39. So 39. Next week's is episode 40.
Oh my god. Oh, and I know what we're doing next
We've got
week.
a great one for episode 40.
Oh no, episode 40 is going to be a classic comic literate episode.
Exactly.
Oh no.
Getting back to our roots, you know? And speaking of roots, I do have one little bit to say on top, which I thought would be very interesting in keeping with the spooky season theme.
Spooky season. I think yours is better than mine. Can you do your spooky season for me?
Spooky season.
Yeah, your voice is a little richer than mine. It just comes off better.
Well, I've done voiceover stuff as well, so I know how to manipulate it a little bit and stuff. I can't do accents. We've established that already. But I can do some stuff.
Just before we finish with spooky season, can I have your best Alan Moore spooky season?
So, having watched an interview by him, I'm kind of I'm trying to pinpoint his voice because that would be a handy thing for this podcast. I think it's just like a low down kind of bit regional-ish kind of English accent. So we're like, spooky season.
I mean, that's quite close to your...
I hate Stan Lee.
Are we just discovering that you sound a bit like Alan Moore? Because that would be really funny.
If I could impersonate Alan Moore, generally, and I'd be like, I actually quite like the Watchmen adaptation.
Just fuck with him, troll him, make a fake Twitter account.
There must be an AI voice of his that's been programmed or something.
I mean, oh god, don't.
I mean, I hope there is what I'm saying.
Day ruined. Now I'm thinking about AI.
So, one little thing that I found, which I thought would fit in with the theme, is I found a story, and the title alone made me think this would be good for the podcast. I haven't even read the actual story yet, but the headline is good enough.
This is off to a good start. Classic comic literate.
The headline is, when hundreds of vampire hunting children invaded a Scottish cemetery and helped spur a comic book ban.
I mean, you're going to have to read the story now.
I mean, I don't want to read the whole story altogether, but
not live on the podcast. That would be really drab.
No, but basically there were some kids that went to a Scottish cemetery with... They were hunting vampires, they were armed with knives, sharpened sticks, and homemade tomahawks. And apparently, many brought their dogs. So
homemade tomahawks?
It was a bit wholesome.
Were these Scottish kids?
I mean, I assume they were. I don't think they took the megabus to Scotland to hunt a vampire.
We're going to hunt some Scottish vampires.
Apparently, word on the playground was that there was a 7-foot vampire with iron teeth had eaten 2 local boys. And apparently it just turned out to be one of the local Tory MPs, so... That's a British deep cut for anyone who...
The irony being, of course, I don't think there are any Tory MPs in Scotland at the moment.
I think they are, they just don't do much because no one likes them. I think that's the problem.
Well, no, because the SNP have such a good foothold in Scotland, don't they? I don't think there are any Tory MPs in Scotland anymore.
Well, essentially, as I said, they...
I mean, it's one of the English ones who's made his way up there.
Yeah.
To eat Scottish children.
And then again, not getting too much into the story, but the next part, the subheading is comic books and communists. Naturally, the communists would get involved as well.
This isn't America. We're not afraid of commies over here.
I mean, we just look down on them, don't we?
Speak for yourself.
I mean, we're not the royal which is appropriate for the royals, essentially. But essentially, yeah, story that led to a comic book ban. It's on Mental Floss if anyone wants to go read it, but I thought it was a nice little mention at the very least. And the other point,
homemade tomahawks. Like, that's really impressive.
I mean, it depends, what's the quality we're going here? Like, are you attaching, like, a vinyl disc to a bamboo stick or something? Or, like, what's the level of, like, where it counts as a tomahawk?
I mean, a tomahawk is a throwing axe, isn't it?
Yeah.
So, something that's hardy enough to withstand being thrown at a vampire or a Tory, or both.
But does it have to survive one throw? That's what I mean. It's like, if
I think to be defined as a tomahawk, it would need to be infinitely throwable, yeah.
But if you just tape like a book to a stick and it looks vaguely like the shape of a tomahawk, is that then a homemade tomahawk? Or does
I wouldn't condone that kind of behaviour. That sounds like book abuse to me.
Yeah, but who reads books these days?
Ugh.
Philistine. A lot of people do, apparently. So I've heard.
Absolute bogan.
Yes. But again, I thought that was a nice little story for what I'm going to try and pioneer is the phrase, the terrifying 10th month of the year.
The terrifying 10th month of the year.
Or I should have said, the terrifying 10th month of the year. We're a little Futurama there for some reason. Go. But yes, so we are doing 2 titles this week because one, slave to the almighty SEO, and we're doing a Rick and Morty comic because Rick and Morty's coming back soon. Mainly, I think we're probably going to veer more onto tangents about the actual TV show than the comic.
Yeah, because the comic's kind of a bit piss weak, isn't it?
So I have some interesting thoughts about the comic. I agree with you, but I have some interesting thoughts as to why and how it kind of stacks up. But yeah, I read like 4 issues and I think I got a good sense of it. Did you get the same?
I did not read that much.
Well, the first point I was going to say was that interestingly, I think it doesn't matter as much how much you read it because the story doesn't really matter in it.
No, they're very episodic.
But then also, for the most part, the story doesn't matter in the TV show. And I think inevitably, how do we go about this? Do we analyze it just on the comic in itself, or do we just throw our hands up and say, here's how it compares to the TV show? Like, what's the route here?
I think that's the only way we could go, because to be quite frank with you, the comics are a soulless cash-in.
A little bit, yeah. But apparently, in my very brief research, the comics do get better after the first 2 volumes. So someone else takes over. And apparently, so I did note it down a little bit. So Rick and Morty, American comic book series written by Zac Gorman, who for volumes 1 and 2, and then it went over to someone named Kyle Starks for 3 to 12. So a lot bigger part written by this other person, whereas we only read issues by Zac Gorman for the first couple. And Alex Fiera, 13 onwards, and illustrated by Marc Ellerby. But the point is that after a certain point, the first 2 volumes expressly follow the Rick and Morty of a different dimension.
Yeah.
So they're just like other stories by a different Rick and Morty, which is like a trope of the TV show. Like it's a constant thing about, parallel other versions of the characters, what have you. But then after that, they actually switched up and made them the actual C-137 protagonist to actually tie in with the stories from the TV show. So we're thinking maybe the ones we read, that was a generally agreed, everyone kind of looked at it the same way of like, these aren't very good, let's like actually tie them into what's good with the TV show. So it became an even closer tie-in to the source material. But I think the reason for that, as I said, was because we were reading it, and I think you probably had a similar thing with me where the story didn't feel like it mattered at all.
I didn't really feel like there was one.
Exactly. Well, it was just like stuff was happening in a Rick and Morty kind of way, wasn't it? But even then, there was like little jumps, which they just wanted to get from one part to the other. So like the first issue, Rick invents a machine that can predict the stock market or something, right?
Yeah.
And then very quickly, they are successful. And Morty at the beginning is like, I'm not sure we should be doing this. Is this legal? His normal Morty shtick. Oh, geez, Rick, all that. And then like a few pages later, they're successful, and immediately Morty is like, I'm voting you out of the company because I'm taking all the risk, my name's and everything, blah, blah. So very quickly, it's like, well, this would be like a big plot point in an episode, but they've just kind of rushed through it in this comic. So that's what made me think the story doesn't really matter in these. And then once I figured once you kind of don't think about the story anymore, what's left? And the only thing that's really left should be the humor of it, because that's what Rick and Morty is also known for. And the humor for me just felt like it was impersonating the TV show.
Exactly what it was doing. And I think there is a real charm to hearing Rick say smart things. And there's a real charm to hearing Jerry kind of dumbly hit upon really poignant truths about the universe without realizing it. And I think without the voice acting and the animation, Rick and Morty falls flat, because that's kind of what it is, isn't it?
Yeah, it's
I mean, we say as we're about to get a season of Rick and Morty with no Justin Roiland.
Yes, and that's a whole nother thing. But I think what's interesting with this is it's the first couple seasons type of humor and writing, whereas where we are now, we've experienced a lot more stuff. Like the characters in the show has evolved in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
So whereas we get this like Jerry's such an idiot and a coward kind of thing, we're now at the point like I think a lot of people now like Jerry's actually like the most like put together character. Like
he's the most relatable human character and probably the most sensible in a lot of regards.
Definitely the most well-adjusted character, I'd say. Because all the other characters, obviously Rick, but everyone else is also fucked up to certain degrees. Jerry is like what a person would be in these scenarios.
100%.
Like there's a common thing that people say, which is that everyone thinks they're a Rick, but they're really a Jerry.
Yeah.
Like admitting that you are a Jerry is like the first kind of step to like self-acknowledgement, like true self-assessment. Like, look, I am a Jerry and I'm fine with it, you know?
Yeah, I'm cool with that.
But yeah, the humor, I felt like it kind of just emulated the TV show. But one thing I did think with that is the TV show had not only one of the best, in my opinion, one of the best TV showrunners of all time, Dan Harmon.
Yeah.
But it also had a team of writers, like a writer's room, and they would build the episode in a writer's room. They would bounce ideas back off of each other. These comics were, at any point in time, written by one person.
And it really put me in mind of something that I think we might have even spoken about on the podcast, that we both consumed a lot of as kids, which is the Simpsons comics.
Yes.
And again,
big tie-in comic.
Yeah, but the thing that the Simpsons comics did really well was they gave us a bunch of short comic strips with a single gag in them, based in the Simpsons universe. So there was a story where, you know, Bart Simpson had an extendable fork in the canteen and he was like stealing fries off Nelson's plate and he gets the fork bent around him. Like maybe a story that runs over 3 or 4 pages, like, you know, 16 panels or something. Whereas here they're trying to present the same amount of content per story as you'd get in an episode of Rick and Morty. Like each issue takes you about 15-20 minutes to read. Each episode takes you about 15-20 minutes to watch. And so there's more of a one-to-one thing happening here, and I think that's why it pales in comparison a bit more.
Yeah, and there's also like an attempt at an ongoing story, which in the TV show...
Well, I wouldn't know, because I read a lot less than you.
I mean, as an example, like by issue 4, they're referencing something that happened by issue 2 previously, but it already established that we're onto a new story.
Yeah.
So it's like, we're onto a new story. But this plot point is actually related to that plot point. And I think that's an attempt, because like Rick and Morty has a certain amount of continuity as well, which it kind of will play with in a meta way sometimes as well, where sometimes they'll just explicitly be like, that doesn't matter now. Like, play with the expectations of the viewer. But they also do pay off some things in continuity as well to, you know, big effects, like the whole evil Morty storyline and everything.
Yeah, but I think one of the things that I really enjoyed about Rick and Morty is that despite it having that multi-dimensional thing going on, whereby, you know, every possible thing has happened to them, there was a strong sense of continuity. You know, you see this really... You largely follow the same Jerry. There's an implication that he gets swapped early on, isn't there?
Yeah.
But you're largely following the same Jerry. You're following the same 2 Beths throughout, except for when they skip universes and they all die. Yes. But even then, we follow the originals, don't we? And they come back and we follow them through. So there is quite a strong sense of continuity in Rick and Morty.
Yeah, and I think, as I said, it's attempting it in this, but it doesn't feel like... Maybe it's trying to do its own version, but I don't know. Maybe my comparing it to the TV show is what kind of hindered my enjoyment of the comic. Like, if there was no TV show and it was just, here's a comic, it's called Rick and Morty.
How would you feel about it if you were experiencing it in isolation?
I think I'd find the humor pretty great, because compared to other comics, I'd be like, this is a really funny comic. But again, you cannot help but think, but the TV show is funnier. But again, my point earlier about the writers, I'm like, this single writer managed to emulate the humor with original jokes. So he's not just redoing other jokes, but, like, redoing the tropes of the TV show and the characters and the relationships, dynamics, and everything. But they did that by himself. So compared to a team of writers who make this a critically acclaimed TV show, I think they did a really good job of making an original version. But when you're comparing just the end product, it's just not as good as a TV show, which is fair enough. And I thought it was just an interesting look again at like tie-in comics, because there's been some good ones. I was trying to imagine this in relation to like the Star Wars comics in relation to the films and TV show.
Yeah,
I feel like
an interesting thought.
That's just one example, but with that, it felt like that was filling in blanks of story. But the Star Wars universe lends itself to like, here are important gaps where we don't know what happened. And then the comic goes, here's what happened. And the fans go, finally, we know what happened when, in this gap. Rick and Morty doesn't really have that because the TV show is so kind of all over the place in terms of when the episodes are set.
Yes. Well, I mean, this is the thing. I think there's a general sense that we're seeing a fairly linear timeline in Rick and Morty, isn't there?
It feels like it, but then there's an interesting thing with the lineation of the TV show where some episodes happen at different times, and there's also a conspiracy theory where a lot of the fans think that the latest season happened in reverse, and that apart from the first episode, because that immediately happened straight after the finale of the previous one. But there's a theory that like the relationships between the characters makes more sense if you reverse all the episodes after the first one. So
fucking stupid.
I don't know if that's intentional. Like Rick and Morty, I think that has a lot of things where it's like the fans be like, "This was what happened," and the critics go, "Actually, no, we didn't intend that." So who knows really? But yeah, I think the comic definitely feels like an attempt to just give further content if you like this content. Like, if you like Rick and Morty, if you love Rick and Morty and you can't wait for the next season, here's a comic book to kind of tide you over in between. I think that's the point.
And they've written a shitload of them.
Well, this is my thinking that maybe they get better after the first two volumes. So maybe I think the next Rick and Morty thing that happens will have to jump to the volume where the writer changes and then go, okay, what's this like?
There's a bunch of it, isn't there?
There's like 60 issues, I think, of this run, and maybe it started again this year as well.
You're hard pressed to get me to read 60 issues of any comic book at this point.
Well, no, but what we do is we look at an isolate part. It's like, how does
we have a look at a
up?
Snapshot, don't we?
Yeah.
That's kind of how we operate.
In the same way that you'd look at like a single book or a film or TV show, like a season of a TV show, we look at a volume or two of a comic. So I think that's the only way we can really churn out episodes. I mean, maybe when we're doing this for a living, then it'll be our day job to read comics. Like
hint, like, share, send reviews.
Yes, exactly.
Tell your friends.
5-star and all that.
Yeah,
but yeah, I did think the art. It was interesting that the art did really good job of
looking like Rick and Morty.
Yes, seamlessly going from the TV show to the comic. Like, there's no change.
But I imagine it'll be one of those things that actually, because there's so many animators and artists on board, there will be a style guide for how you draw Rick and Morty. Like, have you seen the Simpsons style guide?
Or at the very least, I think any animation must have those kind of templates and stuff.
Well, have you, like, there's a very specific style guide for the Simpsons that is now public, and it's beautiful. It's this huge visual document. That's just a bunch of early Matt Groening illustrations saying Homer can do this and his face can do this shape, but the faces can't do this shape, and when you draw him in profile, he has to look like. Do you know what I mean? And I imagine because Rick and Morty's been going for a while now, there will be that set of illustrations, that style guide.
Yeah,
and so I imagine it's actually quite a simple task because somebody's done the work for you and told you what to do and what not to do.
And you said a similar thing with the Star Wars because you had the actual live action actors to like base your drawings on and stuff as well.
Absolutely.
So probably a similar thing. I did enjoy the first, you were saying earlier about like isolated stories with like one joke, the Summer story at the end of the first issue.
Oh, right. Okay.
I like that because it was just like, it was Summer in the future. If anyone hasn't read it, there's Summer in the future. She's like a freedom fighter, space adventurer kind of thing, like badass.
Think Clone Beth.
Yeah. And she's in some battle or whatever, and she's with some people, and one goes like, how did you get that scar on your shoulder or whatever? She's like, that happened a long time ago. And it just cuts to her in modern day trying to straighten her hair while eating a slice of pizza and just burns her shoulder. And I do
typical summer
jokes like that, like almost, the end parts, the post-credit parts would be like a one-off joke in the after the episode. If the comics were kind of like that, I think that play off a bit better.
I mean, there's all these great moments where it'll cut away to what Jerry's up to while the action's happening, and he's just got like a ship in a bottle or something, and he's pulling a really concentrated face. And I always found those really charming.
Beekeeper Jerry is my favorite favorite Jerry.
Yeah,
because beekeeping is just it's a nice thing. Like I imagine if more people kept, it'd be kept bees or be kept, it'd be a better world.
There is a word, an apiarist.
Sure, yes.
An apiarist is a beekeeper.
Yes.
So if there were more apiarists in the world.
It goes to show there's not much to say about the Rick and Morty comic that we're going on to beekeeping already.
I mean, apiarists are quite interesting folk.
It's something I'd love to do one day, but it also feels like you have to be a certain amount of wealthy to like have land to have bees on,
Yeah, and I suppose because there's this big push in a lot of countries for urban bee farming because, of course, the bees are in danger and we do need the bees.
Well, it's an interesting thing recently. Honeybees have been saved too much that they are now disproportionately affecting the non-honeybees. And I saw stories were coming out of this actually quite recently, and it said what about bumblebees, for example? In England, bumblebees are quite more prominent compared to
honeybees. They were the most
common
species.
But in America, they're just one of a bunch. So bumblebees, for example, there's other kinds. And then one of them was also, and think about the wasps. And everyone just collectively went, no, fuck off.
Fuck wasps.
I don't care if they go extinct.
They pollinate nothing.
And here's the thing, right? People always say, anyone who is in the know, they say, we should not allow if any species goes extinct, it affects the entire food chain and the entire ecosystem, right?
Also, fuck wasps.
Well, yeah. But my argument as well is we've had species go extinct already. It's one of the great tragedies of humankind is we've resulted the extinction of so many animals already, and everything just kept going. So who cares if the wasps die, really? I think that's a fair point.
Well, I think what's interesting is that, of course, we now have these mass flocks of things that would traditionally be prey animals. Like urban pigeons. Urban pigeons have no business being as proliferated as they are.
No, they are the hangers-on of just a species that will just relentlessly stay alive regardless.
They're quite impressive.
It is impressive.
Anything.
But their thing is more we'll eat anything and we reproduce
incredibly
as much as possible.
Quickly, yeah.
So that's their main staying power, I would say. But back to the comic.
Hey.
And actually,
classic comic literature.
Ironically, I think rather than back to the comic, maybe worth just saying a little bit about the Rick and Morty TV show because
you know more about this than me. Sorry, I was biting my cat.
That's
not
fine.
biting. I was giving her a playful nibble.
That's even worse. That makes it sound worse.
Look, she came for a cuddle. I gave her a cuddle. Right, that's how this works.
The thing with the TV show is it's gone through all the controversy with the Justin Roiland thing and all that. And I think, to be honest, there's not as much of a point us getting into it because I don't think we're going to do it justice at all. If you Google Justin Roiland, you will see all the news stories and everything, all the creepy stuff that he has done. And the
allegedly.
Yes, and the toxic work environment that a lot of people have said that he basically created.
Allegedly.
Well, I mean, mate, I've just said other people said it. I'm doing the Trump thing. It's people are saying.
Yeah,
I'm
absolutely.
Not saying, people are saying. But specifically, a lot of people said, including Dan Harmon, who is the main guy behind Rick and Morty nowadays.
Allegedly.
But the thing with that, what's interesting about that show is it was always creditors being Justin Roiland and Dan Harmon. And now we're finding out that Justin Roiland pretty much just had the original concept and the voices and kind of the style, the initial style of the show.
But if you see those shorts that they made of it before they actually made the show, it doesn't look anything like Rick and Morty yet.
Oh no, they 100% got actual animators to make the show good.
I mean, to start with, it was called Doc and Marty, wasn't it?
Yeah.
It was just a straight rip-off of Back to the Future.
Absolutely. And then they kind of transitioned Rick into more of a Doctor Who character, character who's so smart he can do anything kind of character. But yeah, the creation of the two, it's Dan Harmon that really made it an actual viable TV show and gave it the heart and the writing and everything.
I mean, that's his thing though, isn't it?
Well, exactly,
he's a showrunner.
Yeah. But it's coming back now with new voice actors, and they haven't even revealed who the voice actors are yet.
No, and I'm really intrigued because Justin Roiland voiced Rick and Morty, didn't he? And like Mr. Poopy Butthole, and like he
Mr.
voiced
Meeseeks, I think.
He voiced a bunch of the characters, and so I'm really, I mean, and there are a wealth of people who can do a pretty nailed on Rick impression,
including Dan Harmon. He can do Rick and Morty, and I did think for a while like maybe he's just gonna do it now.
Yeah,
because he can do them.
I think it would be more interesting if all of a sudden, I mean, it would be the most interesting if they killed off C-137 and suddenly we had a different Rick who
sounds slightly different.
Yeah, absolutely. Because most of the Ricks, all the Ricks generally sound the same, don't they?
Yeah, I think the fans would hate more that the character that they've grown attached to was killed off rather than a voice actor change.
Yeah.
Like there is a subsection of the fans who think the accusations are bullshit and it's a fucking woke cancelling or whatever the fuck they want to call it. But there's those fans who are not happy with that. I think more fans would understand would be like, but we care about these characters, this character specifically, and now you've killed and replaced them. Like,
yeah. I mean, the fact that as Rick and Morty fans, we both know that he's C-137.
Exactly. I think
everything,
if any TV show could do that, it's probably Rick and Morty.
Yeah.
But I still think there'd be a bit of a backlash of like, no, we want to stick with the main ones.
I mean, I'm intrigued to see what the first 5 minutes of that episode are going to be like when they obviously have to address everything.
What's interesting is there's another TV show that Justin Roiland was voicing and created called Solar Opposites on Hulu. And what's interesting about that is he just did the one character. So that new season came out a couple of months ago.
Yeah.
So what they did was the trailer for it was the characters. So it's the premise is they're aliens living on Earth, essentially. Yeah. So they have all the alien technology like Rick and Morty, but they're less of like, I'm a genius who could do anything. It's more like them fitting into Earth life and stuff. And what happens is one of the characters picks up a voice changing ray and accidentally shoots the main character, and you hear him like choking, and then the voice change, it goes from Justin Roiland's old one to Dan Stevens, the British actor.
Oh, brilliant.
Who doesn't do an impression, right? He just literally does his own version. And it's like, right, my voice has changed now. I'm British now. Deal with it. Also, it was a time-affecting race. So all the past, all the flashbacks are now that voice as well. Just deal with it.
That's so good.
And then his alien partner, the kid character's like, we should fire him again and change it back. And his alien partner's like, no, keep it. I like the British accent. So that was how they tackled it.
How brilliant would it be if Rick was just British all of a sudden?
Well, we've heard in the trailer that he is. You hear their voices, so it's the same already. It'd be great if they just did like a completely different voice for him.
Oh, have we heard the new voices?
Trailers just come out like I think this week. So yeah, we've heard the new voices. They basically sound like people doing a good impression. So you can hear the difference, but it's still quite close. Well, again, I think they were scared of the fan base reaction. They were like, let's just keep it as close to as possible, yeah?
But Rick and Morty has been a franchise that has been unafraid of upsetting its fans for the longest time.
But the problem is that's kind of part of it, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like that they do these meta things to mess with like fan expectations of like the continuity and stuff like that. But I feel like that's different to how you experience the TV show.
Yeah.
It's like when a character gets replaced, but the actor gets replaced on a TV show. Like, I mean...
The Witcher.
Yeah, I was literally about to bring that up. I was like, I didn't even watch the last Witcher season.
No, me neither.
Because I just couldn't be asked, and I couldn't
I was only there for Henry Cavill.
Yeah, literally. I did not want to see a sad Henry Cavill leaving the show kind of thing. And also, apparently I didn't even watch it, but apparently they did a really fucked up way of like, now he looks different. Like I'd rather they just don't do it canonically. Like, just replace the actor and just get on with it.
Like the mom in Fresh Prince of Bel-Air.
Well, that's a whole backstory thing as well, isn't it? But yeah, I'm excited to see what Rick and Morty's going to be like now. I'm hoping that it's going to be a better TV show because of a better work environment. Although apparently Justin Roiland was basically recording from his basement and wasn't in the office anyway.
I think it's going to lose some of that like really free-form improv.
But they'd already lost that after season 2. Because
they won't do the Mind Blowers anymore.
The interdimensional cable.
They changed interdimensional cable to the Mind Blowers.
Mind Blowers is a bit more, and they only did that for one season. But the Mind Blowers thing was a bit more like let's put these characters in funny situations. Whereas Interdimensional Cable was just like, fake doors. Look at these fake doors.
Well, and this was the entirety of Justin Roiland's humor was, I missed the door face. Look at me. And like, it was a bit asinine and juvenile when compared with the texture of the show.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like, I suppose as much as it was part of Rick and Morty, and like having seen some of his work from before is absolutely his thing.
Yeah.
The way he introduces a character or builds a character is just to give them a silly name and go, I'm Mr. Mic Stand, you know? Like,
yeah, exactly. I'd tell you what, going back to the comic briefly before we change subject again, one thing I thought was interesting was in the comic, they do the classic, like, Doctor Who, like, quick, we have to run now thing. And they only really did that in the first episode or maybe the first season. Because very soon after that, if anything happens, Rick's just like, I have a thing to sort it. There are very specific scenarios where Rick's like, no, we do actually have to run because this situation, like my powers have been hindered or whatever, my intellect or my gadgets are all fucked or something.
The Vindicators episode is a really great example of that.
Yeah, and he put himself into that.
He sawed them, didn't he?
Yeah. Or the one joke that I thought was so underrated but was so good was the part where the government are trying to like capture or trick Rick and Morty, and it turns out the information they had to capture him, like his weakness.
He's scared of pirates.
Yeah, but his weakness was like a metal. It's like, no, I created the metal.
Sanchezium.
It's like oh, Sanchezium. And they're like, all right, hold back. He's probably not scared of pirates either. And then the pirates appear from invisible. He goes, the pirates was true, run! Good joke. And I think that's pretty much too much we get into without talking in circles. I mean, beyond like analyzing individual Rick and Morty episodes, and there's probably already a podcast that does that.
I imagine there's quite a few.
Yeah. And how much can you really do beyond that joke was good?
Well, this is it, isn't it? I mean, really digging into, I think my favorite thing that happened is digging into Rick's relationship with Beth.
Oh yeah.
And how that's affected her relationship with Jerry and her children was like really well handled and really interesting when you actually scratched under the surface. Every episode that has the therapist in it.
Oh yeah, she's one of the best.
Dr. Kim.
Yeah, she's back in the new season as well.
Yeah, like every time they introduce her, you're like, we're going to get some revelations. And the fact that Rick just keeps showing up in her office to talk, and he's like enjoying therapy but doesn't want to. Oh, it's just so good.
And she's one of the only characters that Rick can't like outthink or fuck over anything, because she's just like, look, I get what you're doing. Like, I understand. Like, it's
Rick's
fine.
power is that you don't understand the things that he understands, and actually
she's just accepted, like, I don't understand the science, but I understand your motivations, like what you're doing. That breakdown at the end of the pickle episode.
Yeah, fucking like covered in rat feces and literally dying at your own hands.
And all the main fan base took from that was Pickle Rick. Like, that was it. And it was like, you are missing, was it the woods for the trees or whatever? Like, the best part is right at the end.
There is a subset of Rick and Morty fans that I cannot stand. And it's the guys jumping up and down on the counter in McDonald's demanding Szechuan sauce.
That was fucking embarrassing.
Yeah, no, to the point that I didn't tell people that I watched Rick and Morty for a good year after that happened.
To be like, oh, I'm a fan of Rick and Morty, and for people to be like, oh, you mean like those people? Like, God, no, like nowhere near that.
I think he's an arsehole.
Yes, he add him to the pantheon of characters where it's like the fans have missed the point of the character. Add him to Rorschach from Watchmen, the Joker,
Harley Quinn
to an extent, but she's good now. So Batman is more complex, I think, because
who's more complex?
Batman.
And we're talking about Batman Jr. here, not Batman Senior.
Yeah, but Batman Senior is like it's like a very specific niche. Oddly enough, interestingly enough, I read the Flashpoint Beyond comic.
Was it good?
Terrible.
Hey, should we do it?
Terrible. Yeah, we could do it, because you know the characters and everything related to it. So
if enough of you write in,
we'll do this terrible comic.
Yeah, we'll do it. We'll just go for it.
Yeah.
And it'll be a miserable day for me, and that will be the enjoyment for all of you.
Do you not enjoy shitting on a bad comic? Like, I get that a bit when I talk shit. When I talk shit about superhero comics, like I get a little
don't feel
something from that.
good in the moment. Do you know what I mean? I don't like the way it makes me feel that I have to do it.
But on the one hand, I don't like shitting on someone's work.
Yeah, well, this is it, isn't it?
But on the other hand, when the work is bad or worse because of the big studio or publisher, Marvel or DC, then I'm like, you guys ruin this.
I think the worst bit is when I notice something and then you vehemently argue against me, like with Spider-Man, with John Romita Jr.'s Spider-Man. I still have those screenshots on my phone, and I was with a bunch of artists the other day because that's just my life, apparently.
Did I send you a screenshot from like a subreddit, and it was people having the same like point of view?
Yeah, as me, just shitting on where the eyes were looking and stuff.
So you're not alone. Like,
No.
it's a common thing.
For reference, guys, if you are an ardent comic literate listener, you will think that I was actually quite demure in my response to John Romita Jr.'s Spider-Man.
And that was take 2.
We re-recorded it because his dad died.
And then we did a good little introspective on John Romita Sr. and his amazing work.
Because he's a fucking incredible artist. And so, yeah, my actual response to that Spider-Man run is lost to time now because it was just too insensitive to put it out, wasn't it?
Exactly. For the time, yes.
Yeah, like we recorded the episode and then like 4 days later I get a call from Ryan saying, by the way, John Romita's just died. It wasn't good soup.
But I think we'll have that going forward as well. We're going to do more superhero comics. And to be fair, was it not more interesting when the art was bad versus the constant house style, same and same again kind of thing?
Well, I mean, it was something different, wasn't it?
Exactly. So, speaking on that, the other comic that we're doing this week is we are back to spooky season. We took a little detour off the spooky train.
Yeah.
And now we're back onto
Rick and Morty's a little bit spooky.
It can be a little bit
spooky.
But this is pretty spooky,
But now we're back on spooky season, Ryan. I need one more from you.
Okay.
One more spooky season, baby.
Spooky season. Mwah.
You don't know how much joy that brings me.
Well, luckily it's recorded and out there in the world, so
I can just listen to it when I'm having a bad day.
I'll give you an isolated clip.
Can you just put time signatures for every time you do spooky season in all the spooky season episodes?
I mean, I'm not going to go back and do the previous ones, but I might do it for this one.
Oh.
If I remember. I might do it for this one that I just did.
You for much.
I might do it. I'll do it for this one specifically, because when I go back and edit, I'll listen to this part. I go, right, I'll jump back to a few minutes ago and I'll do that one. That one will be in the episode description. People will be like, why is there a timestamp for Ryan saying spooky season amongst the... This one's going to have a few more timestamps for when we do Rick and Morty and when we do this next comic. So, and speaking of this next comic is a spooky title, the Harrower or Harrower? I think it's just Harrower.
It's Harrower.
It's a weird word to say, isn't it?
Harrower.
Harrower.
I don't think it's a word.
I don't think so. I suppose it's the name of a character. So
it's a
they
proper
get away.
noun.
Yeah, they get away with it in that regard. But it is a comic that came out this year. Surprisingly, a lot of horror comics don't all come out around October.
No, you'd think, wouldn't you?
Take advantage of that. But I'm all for, like, if you want to keep releasing horror comics throughout the year, I'm going to say no, because I enjoy...
you can't just do it in spooky season,
I enjoy the horror comics. So, but this one is powered by... Up again, very professional. So this was a deconstructed slasher genre from writer Justin Jordan and artist Brahm Revel, who apparently did Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, so... Good,
cool.
Good reference.
One that we'd have read, or
it just says Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, so I'm assuming it's probably not the first one or the Last Ronin.
Yeah.
Probably would have said if it was Last Ronin.
Last Ronin was so good.
It was a good read.
So good.
And with this one, I was going to say this one is only a 4-issue limited series. I'm genuinely asking, I'm not like trapping you or anything. Do you want to give us a brief synopsis of the first issue? Because I feel like if you go anywhere past that, you're just getting into like spoilers.
I can give you a brief synopsis, but it's kind of it's like an early Jamie synopsis where I give you kind of a left of field description.
Okay. Is it of the first issue only?
No, it's of all 4.
All right. Let's wait until we've talked
but
about it.
It's good. It's good though.
All right. For the listeners, I'll say if you haven't read this comic, I will say it was a good comic. I enjoyed it. It was a kind of a twist on the classic slasher teens getting killed off genre of horror. Basically, the the gist is there is a town in New York called Barlow, New York State, I assume, and there's the urban legend of the Harrower, and all the adults are like, yeah, it's just an urban legend, don't worry about it. This character, the main character we follow, called Jessa Brink, her brother died like a year beforehand, so she's a bit like, anniversary of his death kind of thing. They're going to a party, and maybe something
I thought
happens.
it was the 10-year anniversary.
It might be, yeah. I might have got that wrong. It was some time ago that it was the anniversary of her brother's death.
Yeah.
And yeah, they're going to a party and maybe some spooky shenanigans happen. So that's basically the story. I would say I quite enjoyed it. What did you generally think of it?
It was fine.
Worth recommending or not?
No.
Fair enough. We'll get into the details, but that's the non-spoiler as much as we can get into. And if you want to go read it, it's 4 issues. I recommend it. Get into it.
Time for the spoilers.
And now we're into the spoiler section of Harrower.
So.
Yes.
Hot Fuzz.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah.
A little bit?
A little bit.
It's basically the same fucking plot.
I mean, I wouldn't credit that only to Hot Fuzz. I see what you mean, but it's also a bit like Stepford Wives. It's a bit, I think we're like, basically the reveal is, if you're in this part, it's basically a conspiracy by the entire town, essentially.
To
this
purge all the teenagers once a decade. So all of the adults in the town converged once a decade to purge all the teenagers to cleanse the town.
And this is the twist right at the end of issue 4. So this is the end reveal.
And then they have a Judas, which is one teenager who's in on it, who gets them all to one place.
Which I enjoyed. They referred to him as like the Judas goat or something. And he has a goat on his t-shirt.
Do you know what that's a reference to?
Other than the Bible, no.
Right. So, no, it's a very specific reference to a practice that happens in slaughterhouses.
Okay.
So, for reference, my dad was a butcher and a meat inspector. So his job was to ensure that everything was above board that happened in an abattoir. And they have a stunner, right? So it's a big machine, and you walk the sheep up to it, and one at a time they go in, they get a big old electric shock that stuns them, and then you slit their throats.
This is probably the spookiest part of the entire spooky month that we've done. Yeah.
So what you'll do is you'll find one sheep that seems particularly smart, and you will train the fucker. Get up on the thing and walk up the stairs and stand in the machine. And then you let them out the other side alive. And that is your Judas sheep. And you never kill your Judas sheep because sheep are really good at following other sheep. So you have a Judas.
That's a great reference. I'm glad you explained that, because that does add like another level to that plot point.
So my dad once saw a slaughterman accidentally, a new slaughterman who didn't know about the Judas sheep.
Was his name Slaughterman?
He was he was Butcher Slaughterman.
Yeah.
That was his name. And he killed the Judas, and they had to pull 3 other slaughtermen off him because they were so angry that he'd killed their Judas. Like, they went fucking apeshit because all of a sudden their job was a lot harder because they had to wrangle all these sheep up now until they could find and train a new Judas. But also, even though they kill all this livestock every day, they're still human beings. They were like, you killed our pet.
Yeah.
Like, we'd had him for years. He was a homie. Like, why? He was twice as big as all the other sheep. How did you not know not to kill the Judas?
It's a particular kind of horror, like a horror thing of well, I was going to say the concept. Because imagine being a human, that you're a human who lead other humans to... I mean, that's the thing of the comic. I think what would have... I don't know. I would have made... I'm asking, would it have made it better or worse if the character, this guy, who I can't remember the name of, but he was essentially the Judas sheep for these teenagers, would have made it better or worse if he was like a bit remorseful or was put upon him? Because he's very much I'm loving all this, like,
he
kill all the
fully
kids.
bought
Like,
into it, yeah.
He's like bowing down to the Harrower, and he's like, I'm one of you, I'm on your side, like, cool.
Well, he reveals himself in like the end of issue 1, maybe the start of issue 2, by just getting on his knees in front of the Harrower and being like, you are his servant, I am a servant also.
Yeah.
And I was like, whoa.
Do you think that was a good twist?
Well, yes. I think it would have been more interesting if we'd have seen him as a more sympathetic character throughout the whole run.
Yeah, I think in terms of like tropes of these kind of horrors, there's only one I could think where... So normally with late 90s, that character was never like the bad one.
Yeah.
But they were often used as a red herring.
Yeah.
And the way I know this specifically is because they played with that in the first Scream film.
Yeah.
Where that character was made to look like they were the killer, and then they weren't, and then they were again. So they played with that.
You know, can you remember the first Scary Movie film where there's the two male characters, the protagonist, like the main character's boyfriend and then his friend, and he'd done all the murders because he thought his friend was in love with him.
Yeah.
And it turned out that he just wasn't gay. And he'd like the whole time he'd just had like a complete misapprehension about what was going on.
Yeah.
That really tickled me when I was a kid. That really tickled me.
You know, interestingly, Scream, the working title was Scary Movie.
No shit, was it?
Because that's like the thing of it is it's about scary movies. And that's the line in the first phone call. It's like, what's your favorite scary movie? So that was a working title. I don't know why they changed it, but what would the scary movie have done? Well, let's call it Scream.
Scream is a very good name for a horror
Back
film.
to the Rick and Morty, there's an alternate dimension where Scream was called Scary Movie and Scary Movie was called Scream.
Was there actually?
I don't know. Is there actually an alternate dimension?
Well, yeah, of course there is.
I mean,
There's
theoretically,
infinite.
there's one for everything, potentially.
Yeah, they're infinite.
Infinite curve, finite curve, if you're talking Rick and Morty.
Yeah.
That's a deep. But yeah, how do you feel about that twist? It wasn't just the twist that, oh, he's in on it. The twist, it was the first reveal of like, oh, there's something grander going on.
So, yeah, I think it's definitely really important for this because it's such a short run that we get a sense that there's something bigger happening right at the start. So I think on that level, it was really effective. I think the fact that he was in on it took away a lot of the suspense.
But then also, I felt like that suspense came back when he
got to the party.
When he got to the party and was just effortlessly lying about
Yeah.
everything being fine. And I thought that was a good like ramping up the tension for the reader. That reminded me of the old Hitchcock thing. The building tension is, for anyone who doesn't know, his example is if you have a scene in a film where two people are talking at a table and then an explosion happens, you go, what the fuck was that? If you do the same scene, but you show the bomb at the beginning and then show the conversation, then that's the tension.
Yeah, and I suppose that's how they built the tension. I just think it would have been more powerful if we'd had a bit more time to build him up as a likable character before we then realise that he is the dirtbag.
Yeah, but I feel like they had 4 issues to do it in, and I think they did the best they could with
They
that.
smashed it in 4 issues.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like, I mean, I suppose one of the best things a comic book can do for me is leave me wanting more, and this didn't. It satiated what I got from it.
I wouldn't mind seeing like a continuation of this world. Like,
yeah, 100%.
Maybe next year, like things go a bit different, and we know who the Harrower is, and there would be more of an emotional connection.
Well, I suppose
to a
the
sequel.
fucked up thing is that that Jessa does become the next Harrower, and
Exactly.
we don't see her become. So, for somebody who hasn't read it, there is the Judas Goat, and then they pick one of the kids to become the Harrower, and it's a generation that goes back 400 years, they say. And so Jessa's brother, who she's been grieving for all this time, it turns out he is the next Harrower.
I did see that coming once after a certain point.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's the point at which you go in, she runs into the room and she sees all the adults there, and you work out that her dad is kind of in charge of it.
Yeah.
And we get a nod to that right at the start because the mum doesn't want to go. And he says, well, no, our family's really important here. We've been doing this for a long time. And so, yeah, I kind of saw that coming, but it was a nice twist. And then the tension between them at the end, it kind of, you know, when you talk like deprogramming became a thing after 9/11,
or even like Waco and stuff like before then.
Yeah, it's been part of the American consciousness for a while that people get programmed by cults.
Maybe originally the Manson murders.
Yeah.
The original one, yeah.
And so seeing just a hint of that kind of, oh, this person's been really conditioned and she's trying to break through that conditioning. I thought that was interesting. And again, we've seen that a bit in comic books. We see it a bit in Why the Last Man, don't we? Where, you know, there's certain characters that have been programmed and they're trying to deprogram themselves. And
you see it a lot in superhero comics, and normally because it's normally a twist related to like, oh my god, this good character's gone bad.
Yeah.
Oh no, wait, they were brainwashed or something. So there's that.
like
comes up a
when
lot.
Captain America was working for Hydra.
Yes, yeah. The controversial Hail Hydra. I literally read that and I was like, oh, sales are not going well then, are they? Like, we needed something to boost everything.
Kind of impressed that I knew about that.
Well, it was one of those things that hit the news almost, like the wider
Captain America's a fucking Nazi.
Yeah. Similar to when Superman died. Like, that was like a news event. And then he was back, like, months later.
Because he's Superman. You can't kill Superman.
But then it's still like, made for such a pivotal moment. Like, the death of Superman is remembered for how people felt in the moment.
Yeah.
And then that, I think, started if a character dies, they're going to come back very quickly anyway. Yes. So don't even worry about it. But, yeah, I like this. I enjoyed the art from the start. I like the additional line work. I thought it made it like kind of a creepy kind of vibe, which I enjoyed.
Yeah, I quite like. I mean, the art wasn't anything special for me. I think that I'm having an issue now with the way I read comics because I've been doing this for a little while, and so over the past year, I've read like 40 comics, and I probably would have read maybe 5 or 6. And so I'm much more critical of art than I was at the start of the podcast.
Right.
The art is good, isn't it? Like, there were points where I had the same issue that I sometimes had in the ones, where I couldn't really tell characters apart, and I wasn't sure who was doing things. And again, they didn't have much of a distinct voice. Like, Brian E. kind of was very scared, and that became a thing through the comic. But beyond that, a lot of the character models were quite samey. They all had that kind of same pink or purple toned long hair with the bob haircut and stuff.
I think a lot of this, like other horrors we've done recently, I think and a lot of other comics generally, they rely on the tropes. So to kind of get across, like, here are the teens that are the focus of the story, and here's the main character. I think and also, like, it knows that they're going to be killed off quite soon anyway.
Did you notice the very subtle use of a non-binary character without anybody mentioning that they were non-binary?
I did. They referred to them as they a couple points, and I literally went, oh, that's nice. And that was...
Yeah, it was kind of cool, wasn't it? That they did it without it being a thing. Like, it was just, this is normal in our world now. Yeah. There is a non-binary person, and everybody's using their pronouns, and nobody's making a big deal out of it. Yeah. And it's not important to the story, but it represents the rich color of human life now, that's just a really normal thing in our world. And I thought that was really cool.
And also I like the idea that maybe there's someone out there who went fucking woke, because imagining those people is just always fun.
Oh yeah, isn't it? Just sat in their sweaty hovels.
We had a great one very recently, which you might not, this was in the video game space. So
I've heard all about it.
Starfield.
Yeah.
Did you see the clip?
Yeah. But for the listener,
anyone who doesn't know, and how could you not if you're into this kind of space, but the game Starfield came out, and one of the points of it was that you could pick the pronouns of your character, which is also especially fun because they never use them again afterwards. Like,
they just did it to fuck with them.
Well, it's just if for anyone who it matters to, it's like, oh, this is nice, and then that's it. Like, same with this comic, but you still somehow had people raging about it, and one guy in particular, unfortunately a British YouTuber, he's
Scottish, isn't he?
I don't know. He was from here somewhere, but he basically was like fucking pronouns, and like was so gotten to by this very, very minor thing.
I think there's this hilarious mindset that the concept of a pronoun was invented by trans people, and you're like, you realize they're just a fucking feature of almost every language, right?
The epitome of that is that there was a American politician. It was either Lauren Boebert or the other one,
who got angry,
Marjorie Taylor Greene, one of them.
The one who got angry that they were teaching pronouns in schools.
No, even worse. She made a tweet, and it was, there are no pronouns in the Bible.
You've told me about this.
And everyone just collectively went, yep, that tracks.
And on the first day, he created...
God is literally a he, him, according to the Bible.
The absolute abundance of pronouns in the Bible became a big thing in the 90s, didn't it? When whole God, that God is a woman.
Okay.
Like there was a bunch of like edgy American auteurs and musicians. I think the Violent Femmes did a song that said God is a woman, and then obviously in Dogma,
I've seen that one.
Alanis Morissette is God. That was like the most controversial part of that film, is the fact that Kevin Smith had the absolute gall to make God a woman.
And that's definitely not the worst thing he did in terms of religious dogma in it.
And this is it. Like, Dogma is all meant to be a big challenge to Christian dogma.
Specifically Catholicism, I think.
Well, yeah, I mean, when you think about dogma, you're generally talking about Catholicism, aren't you?
Incidentally, I sent a friend recently a picture of a cat in a Pope outfit, and my caption for it was, Catholicism. Yeah,
Nice.
I just wanted to get that in there. But yeah, back to the comic.
Yeah, well, one more thing. You know,
Sure.
the papacy.
Yeah.
I'm
aware of it. Yeah.
Yeah. You know, the Pope has a special car to accommodate his hat.
The Popemobile.
They get really upset when you call it the Popemobile. Like the papacy.
That's what it is.
Yeah, I know. But the papacy really hate it.
Don't make a Popemobile if you don't want people to call it the Popemobile. Like, it's pretty simple.
It's great.
Just put the sunroof down on a limo if you want his hat to fit.
Just give him a fucking soft top. Can you imagine the Pope rolling up in an MX-5?
Or like a dirt bike or something. Like, this was all I had.
A drop top VW bug.
Yeah.
In purple.
One of those bouncing cars.
Like lowrider.
And his hat falls off.
Lowrider.
And his hat falls off and he goes, "Not again." Or something in Italian. Maybe he's Italian, I don't know.
There's a moment in A Knight's Tale. It's the training montage in A Knight's Tale has that song. Low rider.
Right.
It's the low rider. And it's
actually, that song hadn't been released at that time.
Well, it's like he's on a horse, like jousting at things, and that's playing, and you're like, it's a great tune, it's a great scene. But if you think about it, there's a certain element of cognitive dissonance that needs to happen for that to make even a lick of sense.
Well, they had Chaucer in it as well, didn't they?
They did have Chaucer in it, played by Paul Bettany, though.
Yeah.
And like Paul Bettany just brings sparkle to any role. Paul Bettany's such a good actor.
Mainly Vision in the MCU.
He made certain MCU films tolerable for me.
You watching Tony Stark like, when's Jarvis coming back?
Well, yeah, when's Paul Bettany coming back? Like, he's fucking great.
You're like, if you were in like a screen test of Iron Man, it's like, if Jarvis isn't in the scene, characters should be asking, "Where's Jarvis?" This one guy really wants more Jarvis.
Just me with a Paul Bettany t-shirt.
from Knight's Tale specifically.
Him as Chaucer.
So back to the comic. Back to the comic now. What do you think of the design of the Harrower? Did you find it was a creepy look, or?
Yeah, I mean, the skin mask is obviously a bit creepy, isn't it?
I made note specifically the lack of eyelids and lips.
Yes.
Because just that look, like my kind of degree of like scary stuff, like it's obviously very different if you're reading a comic in the daylight when you're meant to be working versus like at night. Like you said before about, was it playing Silent Hill 2? And that was at night, you know, like it affects you a lot more. So I try and imagine with stuff like this, I think, well, how would I feel if I saw that image at night? Like I'm trying to get to sleep, open my eyes, see that. And maybe that's like too high a bar. But that face, if I saw that, I'd be like, fucking hell.
I mean, it's a skin face that's been sewn on, and he's got the big black trench coat and all the knives, and he throws knives, and it's a bit.
Yeah, it's a bit of the unrelenting killer, which is, as we've discovered now, is a common trope.
Again, yeah, super similar to what's going on in The Maniac. Really, like an enhanced, unrelenting force. I mean, there's that scene where the kid has got what, to be honest with you, looks to be an AR-15.
Yeah.
If we're getting down to brass tacks with it, which is not a great look for an American comic, but whatever. He's got this AR-15 and he's pumping rounds into him, and he throws a knife and just completely macerates the barrel of this machine gun.
Wasn't it not a shotgun? I thought it was a shotgun.
Should we check? Because
yeah, sure.
I feel like the AR-15 is actually quite a potent symbol in America right now. I only have a phone in front of me. You have a laptop.
I've got a laptop. I'll do the quick, because I'm on the comic. So let me just see if I can find it. I think it was issue 2, wasn't it? When it was all like kicking off in the bar. While I'm googling that, it was interesting that they go straight to the big teen party, which is normally like the end or like towards the end of a film. Like Scream is obviously the big one, but there's a lot of others to do that as well.
Isolated house on a lake, man. We see the lake. They even show us the lake.
Yep. And there's no phone signal, which we later discover was a whole thing.
Well, but no mobile signals. Like, they're in the woods. I kind of get it. But then when the landline gets cut, you're like, oh, shit's getting serious now.
The fact that we had to use a landline in the first place was the scary part.
Because it's made quite clear that they all have smartphones because they use them as torches.
So I'm looking at now, the when they're outside the house, beginning of issue 3, he's got a pump shotgun.
Oh, okay. Sorry. So, yeah, it's a shotgun.
You might just be like, seeing AR-15, they come up in like modern media a lot. Like they're obviously a hot topic of discussion with the whole gun debate in America right now. So it's probably infiltrated your mind in that way.
Yeah.
But
I mean, the fact that I, as a British person who has no horse in that race, knows what an AR-15 is.
Yeah, it tells you a lot.
Is telling, isn't it? Yeah.
One of my issues with this, there was a lot of points that a lot of things I didn't like about the character Carter Creed, and the reason so he's the son of the police officer.
Yeah.
Or just off, what do you think of that first killing? I thought that was like a good it was how violent it's going to be.
Solid first murder, wasn't it?
Yeah, and that a huge horror trope of like, here's a murder at the start, here are the stakes, now we get into the normal stuff that then builds, what's coming later. But the character Carter Creed, like, immediately I made note of, upon hearing a name, I was like, that's a Stan Lee name.
Well, yeah, isn't it?
Everyone else has like normal names. It's like Carter Creed. Sounds like an action hero.
I really liked the character.
So I like here's the thing. I like the character in terms of the larger plot.
Yeah.
Like I thought he made a good point in it. Bit of a Deus Ex Machina at points, but like a good, of course this is going to happen because we saw earlier that started that off. But a lot of his lines, like his dialogue, like the dialogue in the rest of it was fine. Like the dialogue for me, it fit the trope they were aiming for.
I thought one of his lines was one of the best lines of dialogue in the whole thing.
We might be referring to the same line. Do you remember what it is?
Well, it's his first line where he shoves past the Judas goat. And he's like, "Oh, watch where you're going, Carter." And he's like, "I was."
Right.
And I thought that was really cool. Like that had a bit of an edge to it. Like, yeah, I was watching where I was going and I fucking walked into you.
I agree with you that that's good. The ones I made note of, I think you'll agree, are the other.
Lay it on me.
So one of them, they're going through these tunnels at the bottom. Under the houses, there's tunnels to reach all of them. That's how the Harrower gets around. And one of them asks, like, "Hey, what's with these tunnels?" And he says, "My father would have called it a metaphor for this whole town." And I was like, that's
maybe.
Really... I'm trying to think of the word. It's like...
It reminds me of another person in a tunnel talking about their dad.
Cyborg?
Cyborg in Flashpoint.
Was he in the tunnel at that point?
He was, yeah. They were in the tunnels going to get Superman.
Right.
In Superman's lair, and he was like, "Oh, I just want to make my dad proud."
But that felt like such a pretentious line for the situation.
Yeah.
Like they're running for their lives, and like, yes, there's these big reveals happening, and it's all panicky. And he had the moment to be like, "I'm gonna do a metaphor.
I'm doing a bit."
A bit about the metaphor of what my dad would have said. And then later, when Jessa is fighting her brother Harrower and like kind of rebelling against the parents, he goes, "That's my girl."
Yeah, I thought that was a bit weird.
I was like, this is life or death, man. Like, what you like? Are you so? This is what I've said before. Come back to the ones again. When characters like desensitized, that they can just kind of be detached and cool. Like,
Joss Whedon quippiness.
Exactly. Yes. And again, for the 4 issues, those are the only kind of 2 lines that like took me out of it a little bit. Everything else was very serviceable dialogue.
No, I think you're right. I think you have a valid point, and I clocked both of them as well. Now that in retrospect, now that I think about it, yeah.
I liked that they did like other little horror tropes. Like again, being a fan of the horror, I like the false jump scare when the boyfriend comes up to Jessa, and that's a very common thing where at this stage of the story, it's like someone's round a corner, it's just a normal person, but you just get that like, ugh, like something's going on.
I mean, it's often used as a way to show the main characters becoming jumpy.
It should be like that's the good use of it. Unfortunately, the hack use of it is just like to get a jump scare when everything's fine. Like, that's you've articulated where that's serviceable to the story.
Yeah.
In worse horrors, that's not always the case.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's just like the character's absolutely fine, then someone's like round a corner, I was like, whoa! And you always, what pisses me off about those kind of jump scares is they're not proper jump scares. Sometimes they're not proper jump scares. So what they do is they put like a violin screech or something, and
just
like,
to give you that effect.
And it's just like, that's cheating. Like, if you're gonna jump scare me, at least like set the tension and then have something appear, or the noise, if the noise is diegetic, so it's like actually in the world, that's fine, because that's like you've written it in a way where it happens. But when you just in a movie, when you just
non-diegetic noise
to scare the audience, it's like, fuck you, like that's cheap. But like
it's all cheap though, isn't it? This is the thing.
Well, some of it's done better than others, and like as you articulate, like that's a good version of
that's
that.
a good
Same
use
thing,
of it. Yeah.
I like the art coming back to. I like the art on the gore. I thought was really good. It was quite detailed and
yeah. I mean, the whole thing had that thing that I've been seeing a lot of right now, which is like sepia toned.
Where's
soft color
red
palette
for this, isn't it?
Yeah, lots of warm toned colors.
Mm.
But the same thing was happening in the Human Target, where it was all very warm toned. Like there wasn't a lot of cool toned colors. Do you know much about cool toned and warm toned colors when I'm talking about it?
So I do now recently, and this is a bit of a tangent.
Have you learned about it recently?
I learned about it a bit recently because I watched, and for anyone who wants to watch it as well, I watched a video by Style Theory from Matt Pan, his videos, and he did one about dressing for your colors. And I famously, if anyone knows me, is probably one of the least fashionable people you've ever met. Like my dress sense is very much keep it very simple and no one can accuse you of dressing badly kind of thing.
I don't think I saw you in anything that wasn't a t-shirt and jeans for about a decade.
Oh yeah, and I still keep to that, but now I watched a video by him and it's talking about finding the colors that work with your skin palette. So I thought, well, I should at least buy the things. I'm still wearing t-shirt and jeans, but at least I should buy the stuff that like the colors work better and stuff.
But essentially you can take a red and you can have a cool toned red which has more blue or purple in its composition. And this is a lot of warm toned colors, isn't it?
I'd say having watched the fashion video, you'll have to explain it to me in terms of the seasons. So like, is he a winter? Is it a summer? Like,
yeah. But yeah, I mean, when you get deep into color theory, not all reds are red. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like there's different compositions that you can use to get a certain tone. And so you can have a very warm toned color, which has more from the red end of the spectrum in its composition, and then a cooler toned color, which could still be a color from the warm tone of the spectrum. Like you can have like a cooler toned red. So it's a red that has more blue in it, basically, in its composition, and it just gives it a cooler tone. Again, spent a lot of time around a bunch of artists, and they taught me it was when I was picking out colors for walls and stuff, and they were like, well, that's a bit of a cool toned color, and I'm like, what the fuck are you on about? And then you learn that there is rhyme and reason to it, and it's actually just about light.
Yeah. And for anyone wondering, I'm a autumn season, apparently, in terms of colors.
Yes.
So
I think I'm winter.
I would say, looking at you now, I would say you're a winter, yeah. Which is still cool toned, but it's more bright colors, whereas like autumn is more dark
muted
colors.
Yeah.
Yeah. But again, it's just dressing to your skin tone, apparently. There's all tests you can do where it's like hold up like jewelry to your skin. Does it look better with gold or silver? And if you reverse the contrast on a picture of yourself, like what's showing, are you high contrast, low contrast?
You're supposed to, when you match jewelry up, you're meant to do it with the color of your veins. So if you've got really blue veins, you're meant to wear more silver, and if you've got greenier veins, you're meant to wear more gold.
Yeah,
I wear both because I wear a lot of jewelry.
Fair enough. Well, back to the comic.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, we could just cut that whole bit out.
I'd say I'll leave it in. So if someone might learn a little something, like, seasons and colours.
I mean, comic book nerds could probably choose to learn about what they should be wearing.
We could. I agree with you. As a member of the aimed at, we could do.
I'm a card-carrying member of the community who has a podcast. Like yes. I count myself in that. Don't worry.
We could all do with a little more fashion sense if you've got the time. That's a big thing. So have you got the time to even worry about that kind of stuff? But back to the color composition of the comic.
Yes,
there's a lot of red used in the violent parts. I liked that they had the colors for the dancing, the house party dancing scenes. They used the blue and the pink and purple, and I think that was meant to be like the flashing lights of what's going on. And again, that kind of puts you in like a ethereal kind of bit for a moment, but there's this terror coming along the way. So I think scenes like that are good. They almost make you go like, guys, you need to be panicking. Like, as the reader, that's what creates attention. Like, you guys should be worrying right now, and they're just not.
And then you just don't give a shit.
I feel like some of the kills, and this comes back to the whole genre of the slasher horror, slasher genre as well. They tend to make kills overly violent, and the point of that is meant to, empathize with the pain and suffering of the characters.
I mean, when we're reading The Maniac, we see hundreds of kills, whereas here we only actually see 4 or 5.
With some of them, though, because they make them so overly violent, some of them can come off a bit slapstick. That is a trope of the genre.
Cartoonish.
Well, yeah. So, like, the first kill of the teenagers we see is the non-binary character whose name I've forgotten, but they get a chain wrapped around their neck and they're decapitated by the chain?
No, they don't die like that because they peacefully die in the the non-binary character doesn't get decapitated because we see them sit down and go, I can't go on anymore.
Do they? Because
they have that whole moment where they're like, oh, I can't go on anymore.
Well, I'm definitely thinking of a different character because I know who you're talking about. But I'm fairly certain that the non-binary character was the one who had to stay by the car. And so the reason I think that is because they refer to them as they when the guy, the Judas goat,
maybe there's two non-binary characters then, because the guy the person that can't go on anymore and sits down in the thing, they're referred to as they.
I know them, yeah.
So that was the person that I was on about.
Yeah. I'm talking about the character who had to stay by the car because it was their car, and that's when I noticed the they references, the pronouns.
That's their partner.
Then maybe they're both they then. That's probably it then, yeah. But so that character, the one that stayed by the car, they have the decapitating by the chain. Yeah. And I thought that was a bit slapstick. I thought that, and again, you have that when you go a bit too over the top with the violence, that it can come across a bit slapstick.
Yeah.
And you don't get as much of the suffering with like a decapitation. It looks horrific. Yeah. But you don't get as much of like the empathizing with the suffering of the characters because it's over pretty quickly.
Yeah.
It looks horrible, but yeah, that was one part I noticed. And again, that's just, the trope of the genre, really, isn't it? Another very tropey part is the one character going in the basement.
Yeah, 100%.
And as soon as they started going down, I was like, this is going to be great.
And they know what's going on because they say, is anyone coming with me? They're all like, nope.
We live in a town where there's an urban legend of the Harrower, so no, we will not be coming down with you.
Safety in numbers, we're remaining together.
Yeah. And that character goes down, and then Harrow's there, and then they see him initially in the light. It's like, oh, he's fine. And then it's just his top half, and he drops to the floor, and there's the Harrower. But yeah, that's always a tropey scene, which I enjoyed as well. I think there's a very distinct difference between like the first two issues, which are very tropey, and then the second two issues where it starts to get into this other version.
Well, I suppose because the second two episodes are the big reveal, aren't they? And it's really interesting that actually, if you look at this as quarters, and you can, I mean, obviously, normally you'd look at a film in 3 acts, wouldn't you? But the whole second half is really just the last act, Like, the last act is played out over half the comic.
Yeah, yeah. And that's why I made the point earlier, they get to the house party so quickly.
Yeah, because they need to, because really that would be the second act of the comic, and they're getting there halfway through as opposed to 2/3 of the way in. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I love the trope of the big teen house party in these kind of horrors.
Yeah.
The main reason is it was kind of pointed out well in something else I saw, but it's basically like these murders happen over normally like a span of a bit of time.
Yeah.
And then it's like the characters, the main teenage friends are like, oh, it really sucks. It's pretty horrific how this person we knew got violently murdered recently. Anyway, party on Friday night. Make sure you bring the booze and...
Well, it's like there's been a spate of murders and we're all pretty vulnerable. So what we should do is advertise that we're all going to be in the same place, inebriated with no adult supervision at the same time. That seems really sensible.
Yeah, and I think it's meant to play off as this kind of like teens just like they think they're invincible, so they just do whatever. I feel like any real life situation of that, like the entire year of the school just is off for the week, and they have like counseling and stuff like that.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's just for like an accident, like let alone a violent murder. So it's kind of a funny trope when you watch a lot of these, and it's like, we're having another pie. It's like, yep, there you go.
A kegger. And then the goat turns up. I like that we can just call him the goat.
Yeah,
and he's like,
I mean, that's pretty bad because like the goat normally means
the greatest of all time.
Should I say the Judas?
Yeah, the Judas goat turns up, and he's like, oh, you couldn't spring for the good stuff. And the person whose party is like, yeah, I wasn't going to spend extra money just to get you a nice IPA. And I was like, oh, they're talking about beer.
Did you feel attacked?
I did a little bit, yeah.
Wanker beer drinkers.
Yeah, no, a little bit. I was a little bit incensed by that.
So coming back to the ending, which I thought was probably the most... It was what, obviously, the 4 issues was building up to, and was very interesting.
That's how endings work.
They generally, I mean, in this state of comics, like who knows?
Who knows? Yeah.
But I think with that, what I liked was obviously it was, if you're paying attention, you know that the parents are in on something. I think the shock and the shock of the reveal is how formal it all is, and that really adds to like, oh my god, this is all a thing that's happening. Like, I think Black Mirror did it a couple of times with things like that, where it's like, actually, everyone is in on it. Like, that kind of reveal.
The most recent season of Black Mirror yet?
Yeah, I didn't like it.
I really liked it.
Well, I liked most of it. I didn't like the last two.
I've not seen the last two yet.
Well, then we can't get into it then.
But I really, because like the previous season had very much been somebody gets a chip put in their head and bad things happen. Whereas I feel like this one kind of came away from the technology a little bit, and it was more a straight up and down existential thing.
Wait till you watch the last two, and then we'll
do
talk.
They just go straight back to it?
I don't want to ruin anything for you.
Okay.
But watch those and we'll get into it. We'll get into it on the
yeah, we'll do it on air. Why not?
It'll be one of our tangents.
Yeah.
But yeah, the formal reveal at the end, I see what you mean by the hot fuzz comparison. Like,
yeah, right? It's a shadowy group of the townspeople having a cleanse.
But it didn't feel like shadowy in the sense. It felt more like, for me, it felt a bit more like, trying to think of like good, like, again, like Stepford Wives or that kind of thing.
Or like the Purge episode of Rick and Morty.
A little bit,
when you cut right down to it.
Yeah, the ending of it, for sure, yeah. But with this, again, it's the formalness of it, which I think adds a bit of terror to everything. Yeah. It's, for me, I think the scariest part, like, obviously, it's a deconstruction of the genre, and the beginning, it's people are dying, people are being violently murdered. By the end, it's the true horror, for me, was a reveal of the people who you rely most for safety, the parents, are orchestrating your violent murder.
And I think the saddest thing is that I really thought that, what was his name? Carter
Creed.
I thought that Carter Creed's interception was going to end it all, and then we see Jessa as the next Harrower.
Yeah.
And Jessa's probably the character that we see the most of, probably the character that we identify with the most in the text.
Mm.
And then we see her with her hair shorn as the Harrower.
Yes. And imagine going through whatever this process is. The sewn up lips, I think, was a particularly like strong visual thing for this.
Very X-Men film Deadpool.
I was thinking something a bit more like intentionally scary as opposed to unintentionally scary, because people are like, what the fuck are you doing to Deadpool?
What have you done to Ryan Reynolds?
Yeah. But I thought that like the parents be so organized in this extreme horror they've inflicted on their kids. I liked the little additional part, and I think this was like a really good use of like small panels where they show the parents all saying thank you for keeping my child innocent.
Thank you for cleansing my child. Yeah. Thank you for preserving their innocence.
And the fact that some of them are very into it as much as Jess's dad, and then others are very clearly not.
Most notably Jess's mum.
Yes, but also some of the others who are just like really solemnly like, but they still have to say it.
Yeah.
I think that's like, it was an underpresented factor of it, which when you take a little closer look, you're like, oh, that's really horrible.
Yeah, no, really dark. I mean, it kind of put me in mind of like the Hunger Games films, The Reaping, where they're just like, oh, this again, you know?
But the fact that these kids have just lost these parents have lost their kids in very violent murder, and they just have to thank the person who for it. Like, that's pretty horrible.
I don't know why they thanked Jessa. I don't know why they were thanking Jessa specifically.
That was a bit weird. I don't know if that was like, I don't know. I don't know if that was like because she was part of it or something, and maybe that was they were already assumed that she was going to become the next Harrower. Maybe it's one of those little things. That's like, maybe it's a plot hole, but it's just like it's small enough hole that it doesn't really matter.
And it's an impactful enough it's an impactful enough page that I'm kind of like, even if it is a plot hole, it sort of needs to be there.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like there is an implied reason. I think actually what it really gets across is how ritualistic this is. Like there is a ritualistic expectation that they thank the last survivor.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, there's no good reason for them to do that. And it's just a bit fucking warped, isn't it?
It's funny you say that, because one part I was going to talk about was the motivation or the explanation at the end. And
God told us to do it.
Yeah. But what made me think of that especially, whereas I probably wouldn't have otherwise, is because of the last comic we did, the Neighbors. And so one of my big issues with that was the lack of clarity of like what's actually going on here. Like they showed us a bit too much but not enough, and I feel with this was a good example of like, here's a brief explanation, it doesn't really matter, but here is a bit of an explanation. So for them being like, we've done this for 400 years, the village has done this and it keeps the town pure for reasons because we're all mental basically, and the people who organize it are obviously unhinged, but their reason is their reason, and that's enough to be like, I understand that's enough for me. Like it adds to the horror because it's such a senseless reason.
So I kind of feel like we've exhausted our conversation about this comic in particular. I don't know if there's anything else you wanted to sort of touch on.
I think that's pretty much it. And I think I will summarize by saying I think this is if you're a fan of horror, I think this is a nice little horror story, which is emboldened a bit by its deconstruction of the genre.
So we've now read 3 for spooky season, and this is our last, like...
For spooky season!
There we go. Every time you do that, you're just adding more spooky season work for yourself, because they're 2 time signatures you've got to do now.
Well, one day, in the future, hopefully by next year, next October, I'm hoping that I might have a soundboard by then, because you can get a soundboard that does all the mics plugged into and everything. Not to reveal too much about our setup right now, but
it's pretty basic.
Yeah. But with the soundboard, you have that all plugged in, and you have the buttons with the sound bits on them. So for that, I will you
could be like a radio DJ in the 90s.
Exactly.
Woof, woof. Another one.
But I was thinking more, the first one would be spooky. I'll just play it like it plays on the button and stuff. So hopefully that'll be the first one.
We've now read 3 horror comics on the trot.
Yes.
And I don't know that I'd certainly not really delved into horror comics. I don't know that it was a genre of comics that you were particularly familiar with before we did this.
Not massively, no.
How'd you feel about horror comics?
So for me, and I've said this before, I like the genre of horror. I like the stuff that goes beyond whether it scares you or not. I like what's this? Like, what's the story here?
I was having this conversation with somebody the other day because I just watched Prisoners.
That great film.
Really great film.
Yeah.
And we were talking about, how much more impactful existential horror is.
Mm.
And I think existential horror is kind of the natural evolution of the genre. And I think even though 2 of the 3 horror comics we've read have been slashers, there's still been that sense of existential horror there. And I think it seems to be that's where horror comics have gone. Like they tend to, I mean, obviously, there's whatever your ear is, you're going to be able to find it.
Mm.
But you pick, I mean, I don't have much say in what we read, clearly.
Sometimes I'll ask you.
Yeah, sometimes I get a seat at the table and those decisions made. Generally, I don't. Not that I'm saying that I want to take on that work.
That's fair.
That's late. I sounded really spicy there. I'm very grateful that you do that because it is labour.
All right, Jay, here's the schedule. You pick them now.
You fucking get on with it then, mate.
It's going to be weeks and weeks of Alan Moore and Pokemon.
I literally sent you a voice though at like 3 o'clock in the morning the other day, didn't I? Being like, there's a Pokemon comic we should do.
Pretty much how all the notes for this podcast happen.
Yeah,
really.
Absolutely. But no, yeah, I feel like you picked 3 of the more highly regarded horror comics that have come out in the past few years, didn't you?
This year specifically, yeah.
And they did all ear towards the existential, and I kind of like it. Like I'm quite enamored of the horror comic genre now, having read a few of them.
I think with these specifically, like The Neighbors was kind of its own thing in terms of just what it was, like the story. I think with Maniac of New York and this, the Harrower, I think they have made them. They kind of make them more existential because they've had to make them different. I think if the comic was just, here's a killer and he's killing people and someone might survive, I think that's so basic. Like, even as a film, just like if you a horror film in this day and age, people would be like, yeah, but what else? What else is there? So for anything to gain any traction, the actual plot has to have something else.
Some richness.
Just like the blurb, like the selling point has to be a bit like, yeah, but what else is happening here? So with Maniac, it's, the killer is just still ongoing and people have gotten okay with it, like, just happening. And with this one's interesting because this, on the surface, does just read as a slasher comic.
Yeah.
Like, the blurb is literally just, it's a slasher comic, like, teenagers getting killed. And it's only in the reveal that you go, oh, this is why it's different.
Yeah.
So, and I think it does a good job by getting there very quickly.
Yeah, no, this one, I mean, I suppose it was... We didn't do the things that we normally do. It was paced very well.
Yes.
The panel layout was good.
Yeah. Pacing and panel layout, I think, were very serviceable to the story.
Well, it just needed to be simple, didn't it? And it was. But that was a feature of all 3 of them, I feel. Like, all 3 of the ones we read were a little bit more basic in terms of the visual storytelling, because what they were trying to get across was this impending sense of dread. And so the more time you spend trying to work out what's going on, the less time you have to go, oh, fuck, something's going on.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so, no, I've enjoyed our little sidetrack into horror comics.
We've got a couple more coming up, which might vary in quality.
Well, the final week of spooky season is not a horror comic, is it?
The final week will be a horror, technically.
Technically.
I should say technically. It is a horror.
Technically.
It is a horror. It's going to be interesting to see. I don't want to reveal what it is just yet, but it's going to be interesting.
I think we can do the grand unveiling here now.
Do you not want the episode reveal? Like, here it is.
Okay, yeah, we'll reveal it next week.
You'll see it. You'll see it in the title if you're listening now. You're obviously subscribed.
Yeah, you're always subscribed.
You'll see it in your feed Monday morning, and you'll go, "Oh, they've done this." But I think in terms of the weeks, I mean, what's it? This was the third one, so technically we've got two more.
Are we doing a spooky season 5 weeks
this week? This month it is. Yes, it is. I'm looking at calendar.
We're doing 5 weeks of spooky season.
5 weeks of spooky season because that's just how it's worked out.
Well, my recap was incredibly premature then.
I mean, I say you done 3. Isn't that the norm? Is would be 4 weeks.
Yeah.
So you were on the basis that you thought the last one was going to be the next one was going to be the last one.
Yeah.
No, got 2 more. Next one is a bit of a meta for why it's scary, and that'll be fun to get into. And the last one is a proper horror one, but it's a tie-in to a degree as well. So
cool.
As much as we're giving away on this spooky season, I can't wait to have the button.
Another time code. So thank you so much for listening. If you want to send us an email, you can do so at comicliterate@gmail.com. If you'd like to leave us a review, just do so wherever you get your podcasts from, but make sure it's 5 stars because it does make our day. Thank you so much. Oh, YouTube Shorts.
Yep.
YouTube Shorts. He's going to cut in. I'm trying to get through one without you cutting in. YouTube Shorts. Watch them. They're great.
Any other platform?
And TikTok.
We're on TikTok, yeah.
Thank you for listening. Night. Trying to get through one outro without you jumping in.